is what you told me?
Yeah.
So we do have a representative of Destro in the house for a change, which is a good thing.
We're X-Realmers. We play both sides.
Well, it's I like you play both, but you said Nightmare, so Destro it is.
Sure.
Even though
Um,
most of the population plays both sides.
yeah.
So,
Um,
but
just
Oh, go ahead.
if you want me to do like an introduction of myself real quick.
That's what I was about to say. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the chat, and we'll get things going.
Yeah. My name's Sigon. It's Sigonn on order for my Rune Priest, and Sigonn for my Zealot on Destro. I've been playing since January this year. Like January 6th is when I started. I initially did the Zealot, but I dual leveled Rune Priest Zealot some time. Those are the classes I'm probably the most proficient and knowledgeable in. I regularly do city warbands each week on both characters. I think the game's in a weird spot. Like it should go in several directions with several changes, and I know you and Karasana generally from this, but I have seen Karasana videos in the past of the ranging topics he likes to go over. He does it in an odd format though, so it's at times difficult to understand, so you almost have to watch them all. And I got my general impressions of him from that, and my general impressions of you from your podcast and stream, and yeah.
I tend to be a bit of an oddball with the way I do things. I always have been because I like to look at every viewpoint, even if some people think that I'm not.
Yeah.
I do enjoy hearing all viewpoints because I try to be open minded. I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'm not seeing this. So enlighten me. Explain to me, what your viewpoint is, which is part of what drove me to start the podcast was to hear those viewpoints. And I'm like, I'm not trying to say you're wrong. I want to hear what you have to say. Explain to me your thought process so I can understand it. That's all.
Since I'm like so maybe new and compared to so many other people that regularly play this game, just recently starting this year, and driving myself to play the top tier content, which I think is the top tier content at the moment. It's interesting to see this podcast and then Karasana, because I view you personally both as much more casual kind of players, if I'm not mistaken.
No, you're right. I don't play it to be hardcore. I've said that numerous times. I play it to have fun. I'm aware of the fact that, hey, there are people that like to play that high caliber. I've got nothing against it. I'm where I draw the line is though, I'm like, don't sit there and try to force that on others. If they want to go that route, then by all means,
For
help them
sure.
along, encourage it. But ultimately, this game offers a wide range. I mean, if you want to do PvP focus, go for it. If you don't, then don't. Just understand that on the PvE end of it, you may struggle because the predominant focus is PvP. And that's what I've tried to tell people. But ultimately, I've run into a lot of people with an entrenched mindset where they see where their viewpoint is the only right one. And I'm like, that's not right.
I think it all is like context based, what you're trying to do versus who you're talking to.
True.
I've seen in your podcast in the past, though, you talk a lot about X roaming and maybe the more negative implications of X roaming. I've seen you talk about like from my perspective, forts generally with X roaming, that one faction will push a fort, right? Let's just hypothetically say that would be order. And the predominantly strong warband on order will push a fort and then X roam to destro to defend the fort. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've seen in the past that you talk very negatively about that. But I don't think that's such a negative. I think it's more of a positive, because generally what happens is one faction will push that fort, and then there'll be no defense for the fort, right? There will be nobody to actively fight in the fort, and it inevitably just becomes dead content and becomes
True.
like more PV door-esque.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
which is what you, if you watch any of my morning streams, a lot of the times that's what it is PvE door, where there's nobody defending it. It's empty keep, so there's next
Yeah,
to no
yeah.
renown benefit of
Yeah.
taking it.
And there's no like player involvement because inevitably you're just sitting there AFKing, waiting for the timer to slowly degrade and then hitting the Lord. And then
Yeah.
for your loot, yeah. You talked though, like in the past though, you've mentioned with the X roaming that you find it to be a very negative thing, right?
Yeah.
But I just don't understand that idea because at one end you say it's negative because yeah, people are pushing forts and then swapping to fight the offense, right? To play the losing faction, to, in your words, at times farm them. Yeah. But then also there's the perspective that from your end that you will be doing this and you'll just be PV dooring and AFKing through it and there's no like defense, so it's boring for you, right?
Yeah.
It seems that you're bored both ends, and I find that hypocritical. But when somebody tries to subvert that and actually provide a defense, then suddenly there's this animosity towards it. Why is that?
Well, from my viewpoint and what I've seen people do and comments made by people on Destro when I used to hang out with some of the Destro guilds, I wouldn't have a problem with the X roaming if the way it was being done during fights. Now, this is before the current setup. This was when we were having city fights basically almost on a daily basis.
Yeah, with the campaign fishes.
You had guilds or players on both sides, let me rephrase that, players on both sides that would push a zone, and then in the middle of a fight, they would wait for the timer to fall off and then switch. And it would upend the fight. And that's where I have a problem with the X roaming. When you use it to manipulate the campaign, to manipulate a fight, that's where I have a problem. And I have stuck to that mindset.
But the inverse of that too, at the same extent, is then you inevitably just start PVEing, right? Because you destroy the opposition very thoroughly, right? And they get bored with dying, and then they log off, and now there's nothing left to fight. So you end up with a situation where it's either PV door because, again, the opposition has been kind of crushed, and it's unfortunate, but that's the reality with a skill-based game, right? Yeah, and then the moment somebody tries to jump in and give you something to fight, now it's a problem. It's just, to me, that's always seemed very hypocritical. And I think
I don't have a problem with people throwing something at me. I don't mind losing so long as I lose fairly.
But like, what is a sense of fairness? Because that's all subjective.
Play your side. Don't switch. Don't switch in the middle of a fight. If you're running Destro, stay Destro. If you're running Order, stay Order. See it through to the end. If I lose, I lose. I don't have a problem losing like that. I will never agree with the mindset of, oh, just switch it a whim. And that's what I've had people explain to me, and you've got a fair point, and I get what you're saying. Yes, it does. It sounds like I'm being hypocritical. I don't mind losing. I never have. I've lost plenty of times.
Yeah.
And probably will continue to do so. So, in an answer to your question, that is where I have a problem. When people do things to manipulate a fight so it stacks it for one side or the other. I don't want that.
Realistically with X roaming, from my perspective, because I'm generally new, right? The most proficient player, like X roaming players, right? They tend to play the faction that's losing, and if that ends up happening, like hypothetically, I play Order, right? Order's losing to start when I log in for RVR, and then we inevitably end up winning for a lengthy period of time. We look to X roam to Destro, right? Why should we stick on Order when there's nothing to do and there's realistically nobody to fight? It kind of dries up the lakes in a way.
I get you. Now, this, I agree with you. Now, if you've been on Order for a while, things are one side and you want to switch to the other side, go ahead. I am only specifically talking about during a fight, which this used to happen quite a lot before you started playing, it is you would have either Destro or Order players that would literally, in the middle of a fight, in active, say, KV for instance, they would switch sides. So where it would be an even fight, all of a sudden one side would run the other over. Or
Okay.
you would have people that would jump on an Order tune, spawn a ram, and then run the ram off into PvE so that it would rob Order being able to siege. And then you had ones doing it on Destro too.
Yeah,
That's
I've seen that.
that's that's where I have a problem. I don't care if you play both sides. That's not an issue. I understand that, and as you said, it does help even things out. So if one side's overwhelming, sure, balance it out. I just draw the line at doing stuff that I deem as underhanded, and you're doing it for the sole purpose to gut the game and gut the play.
Okay.
It's specifically to put this in context. Gruffrip, perfect example. Myself, Tosh, and others have seen him do this. You're in the middle of an active fort that you're winning, not that you're losing, that you're winning, and he takes his warband and half of another and leaves and hands the win to Order. To me, that's disgusting because, yeah, I play Order, but I feel bad for Destro because they're fighting hard to win. They're at the very moment of claiming victory, and then it gets snatched from them by their own people. That to me is not something that should be encouraged.
Generally, I've seen that too, but he goes to other zones
Yeah,
to extend the fight in other places because there is a tipping point where a fort is just doomed and lost, and sitting there becomes tedious to even be there. Tedious isn't the word, but like you have a duty, right, as a warband leader to bring fun and enjoyment to your warband, right? That's like the first thing you have to always do, right? Because that's how you keep player retention high, right? In your warband specifically, and people continuing to join,
yeah,
right?
fair point.
And if you don't have player retention, eventually you get to a point where your warbands no longer become warbands; they become 12-mans or small scale, right?
Yeah.
So you have like your number one duty is to provide content. And so, like Grofrip as an example, why would he sit in a fort that is doomed to ultimately fail, to get his players killed relentlessly, right, with almost no chance of winning, when he has the option and the ability to go elsewhere to extend the life of his warband, provide content for them, right? It's not that he's being this selfish person that's only looking out for himself. He's looking out for others. And if he doesn't do that, he'll cease to have a warband eventually, right? So to me, I don't agree with that at all. Like his duty, right, and his responsibility is to his players, right, not anybody else. He has to look out for his own first before he can look out for anything else. And if he doesn't look out for them, like, and provide them good situations, right, then he's just leading them on an endless death, right, loop. And that's not fun to the majority of the players.
I get what you're saying, but it still does not change the fact of why would you pull out of a fight that you're winning, that you have won, and give it to the other side just to go off to another zone. And some of the people that are in Retribution are some of his former guildies.
Yeah.
And have even said that he is notorious for knifing his own faction in the back. Now, this is out of people that know him.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's like a priority for him. Maybe he just does it, like, it's all subjective, his viewpoint versus your viewpoint, or
That's
others'
true.
viewpoints.
That's very true.
And he could be thinking something entirely different of like what's best for him and his warband versus what you think is best, right? And that can change very dramatically in matters of like seconds to minutes.
Again, true. I just disagree with doing that because from my end of it, it taints the win for Order, and I feel bad for Destro because I'm like, they had this one and he just snatched it away from them, and my mindset of that is it's dirty pool.
Okay. Since you do play both sides in this like external wing topic, which side do you preferably enjoy, and which
I
one do you
stay
think
on
is
order.
objectively better? Well, do you enjoy order more than destro?
I don't actively play Destro. I have a Destro character for quest writing because I've actually done quest writing for the game. Other than
Oh,
that,
okay.
I don't actually play Destro. So on that front, I can't honestly answer. I have no right to say anything on that end of it.
Okay. Would you? Is there any reason why you don't play destro? Is it just a subjective thing?
I
Like,
don't like orcs, but that's in keeping with the whole fantasy lore.
okay,
I prefer Dowie, so to that end, I won't play Destro.
okay, it's fair. Um,
To
with
hit,
that said, then, do you have an objective viewpoint with like which faction you deem to be superior? I mean, I don't think either faction is superior overall, but I do think there's points in which one faction is better than the other.
Actually,
But do you?
I agree with what you're saying on that point. I've never viewed one side better than the other. Now
Okay.
there are times during the course of the day when one side displays outstanding skill and phenomenal gameplay, and it's the reason why I point out a lot of the issues that Order does that leads to their own defeat. I mean, I sit in discords where people say, "Well, they're cheating us." No, they're not cheating. You're just getting outplayed by a better player. Even I'll admit that one.
Yeah, I can see that. Do you think there's a maybe that's not like player base related, but rather like a class balance related? Do you think that maybe, for instance, that destro class wise is just has more utility? Like the best example would be like chop and Marara pools, right? Versus order not really having access to those tools. Do you think that maybe destro in some regard is better, like more thoroughly equipped than order, or is order like more? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Not not that I could give like 100% backup to. Not enough to formulate a solid opinion on it. I was also
Okay.
reading what one of the people in chat was saying concerning what happened in Land of the Dead, and
Which one is this?
Sat Bladder, I believe it is. Isn't it the same last night in Land of the Dead? Order had an equal chance to win, but it lost the first couple of fights, and Retribution and Rogrum pulled their 70-man warband out and went to
Yeah.
PvE door an empty zone. Okay, if that's the case of what they did, and I wasn't there, so I don't know. I can't speak to something I wasn't there. But if that's what they went and did, then yes, it would be this. I would view it the same way that I view what I've seen Gruff do. I disagree with it. So I'm not defending Order, saying okay, Order's any better. I disagree with it, but that's me personally.
I see that. I like the problem from like my perspective in playing both sides is that regularly on order there is a effort to organize a zerg, and I'm not saying this like in region or general chat through the game, but there's an effort by guilds to stack warbands in a way where, like, a great example, retribution at the moment, right, regularly puts 48 people in Discord, right? Two warbands worth of people, right? And they hold hands through the zones and they try and find fights where it's 48 versus 24. And it's kind of like, in a way, it's just like, where's the competitive drive there? They're not trying to find the fair fight. They're just trying to overwhelm others. And then they get, at the same tone, upset with others when Destro, in Retribution's case, would get together and hold hands through zones, right? Warbands in particular, and fight them. I don't know. I just don't see the point in any of it for like the Zerg aspect.
Well, without going into too many details, because I can't pretend to speak for Retribution, I do run with
No.
them, and it's the same way I've run with Formosa. Uh, while they do have their secondary group that they try to pull together, most of the time it's not a full group. But I get where you're going with it. I've played in the 4 years I've played. What I've seen on both sides is where some prefer the Zerg, some don't.
Yeah, that's fair.
Now I know from certain people, and I cannot name names, otherwise it'd be starting a fight, and I would really prefer they be here to say it themselves. From what I've seen in the chatters and what I pick up from the guilds that I've hung around, it's a split. Some of them don't want to do Zergs at all. They do not want to. They do not want to run in large groups. They want to stay to one war band versus one war band. But part of what, and again, I'm only speaking from the people that I've hung out with and what I've seen. Some of the guilds have taken the mindset, said, "Well, here goes the Zerg again, so we better Zerg to combat their Zerg," and it generally snowballs. It doesn't matter which side does it, because both do it.
That's fair. I have a question for you then too. Because you are outspoken on X roaming. What do you think the X roaming lockout should be? If you were like, let's just say hypothetically, right? You were the developer, the lead developer for this game, right? And you had complete control. Just hypothetical. What would you set the lockout timer to? Would there be a lockout timer? Would people only be allowed to play one faction?
If I was gonna, well, for one thing, right now the lockout timer as it stands is not really effective, because all people have learned to do is they will simply wait for they'll get into a fight in a zone and then wait for the timer to count down and then switch if the fight goes that long.
Okay. So what, like, let's just remove that, like, the current tense though. Like, you don't agree with the lockout timer and its effectiveness now. But let's just say
I don't agree with the lockout timer's effectiveness currently. No.
Yeah.
As far as if
What would
there
you
should
do?
be one, honestly, I would go for a full. If it were me, and this is only pertaining to me, if it were me, I would put a 12-hour lockout on it. So if you pick a side, that's it. That you're there for the day. I've never really cared. I didn't care for it in WoW when it started that mess. I'm not saying what I'm saying is the right solution. Honestly, I'm fully aware of the fact there's probably no real way to ever fix it. So before anyone
With
goes
how
off, hold on a second, Sigon. I'm also answering the chat too, because
yeah, no,
they're offering tidbits of information, and I don't want to ignore them. So I get what you guys are thinking. You're like, oh, he just doesn't understand. No, I do understand. I'm just trying to put forward a solution to help address the situation, because I've sat and read the forums as well as anyone else can, and there are a lot of people that feel that it is an issue that does need to be addressed.
So I feel like that would be 12 hours. Like, I don't agree with at all personally, but that might be a realistic answer if the population was there, right? If
True.
the server had an immense population and there was always a constant motive to be like playing, right? But as it stands, right, and I think you know this better than anybody else. I do too. Like, as being NA players, right? During
Yeah.
NA time slots, the game is effectively at a really bad point, right?
Yeah.
Like, our population regularly only hits 200, yeah. And there will be times where you log on order on NA times, right? And there's literally nothing to do. SCs will not pop.
Yeah.
RVR is not active. There's nothing to kill, right? The only thing you can do is do PV door, right?
Yeah.
And if there was a 12-hour lockout, right, in that sense, right? And this is even pertaining to EU, right? It almost effectively kind of it stopped people in any way from even trying to balancing out the game, right? Like, because right now, like, with how stale the population is, unfortunately, it's really hard for there to be consistent things to do in RoR, right? From like hour to hour. Like, yeah, maybe there's 3 hours in the morning where you can always have something to do. SCs are consistently occurring. There's many Destro warbands in play, right? But then 3 hours later, all those Destro warbands have logged out because, they've done their 3 hours. They don't want to play anymore. Maybe it's gotten stale. Maybe they got on board, right? And scenarios stop occurring as well. And then you have nothing to do.
Again,
but
very true.
Extra. So, I mean, for me personally, like, I don't agree with the lockout timer at all. I don't think it should even exist. I think there should be a free ability to Extrum whenever you want. And I understand there's always going to be bad apples in the mix that are going to use that to sabotage things in their own devious ways, right? But the vast majority of the player base, I don't think is going to do that. I think, if anything, right, they will constantly be an Extrum population that tries to balance in the best way they see fit. And if the population was higher, I could agree that a lockout timer is good and should be used, but the lower the population goes, the more it just becomes, it stagnates the game on a daily basis, in my opinion.
Yeah, it can be good and bad, but yes, I agree essentially with what you're saying, and again, that's why I said I don't know that what I've suggested would even work. Probably not, given the low population, and I'm aware of that. The real Gamora just made a comment. I want to read this off because it's a valid suggestion. Put a 15-minute lockout so you can't log to defend or attack contribution in a zone to defend a fort. So put something in there specifically to deal with that aspect. But I don't agree with taking the lockout completely off because it would be chaos. You would have people that would switch repeatedly in the middle of a fight. Just to try and get an advantage, and that's part of what used to create so much havoc in the old city system, was because you would have people that would do that, and it was relentless. I mean, for 6 months when I started playing, for 6 solid months, Order couldn't win at all. We would just get annihilated. And I'm like, how is this fun? I'm not saying I want us to be outnumbering Destro, but a little bit even of a fight would be nice once in a while, instead of just getting turned into a bloodstain.
I think the reality is with this game and its population and skill difference within that population currently is there effectively can never be a truly balanced fight. I think the only arena in which you can get a truly balanced fight is City, as it stands now, and maybe 6v6 ranked, right? Outside of those two situations, I mean, shooting for balance should be the goal, right, in terms of strength. But you're never going to get to it. It's like shooting for perfection. You always shoot for perfection, but it's unobtainable.
Yeah, true. And in Splat Bladder, you are correct. I've seen that reverse. It can change hands. It gets really old. And I agree with what you're saying, though. It does reverse. There'll be 6 months where Destro will get their teeth kicked in, and then it's Order doing it. My tendency is I want to be somewhere in the middle. I want things to balance out. I'm not looking to gut classes or say you can't go have your fun. I want the game to keep going, but I also would like to see the population increase.
Maybe, I think, and this is, I think, most visible in Land of the Dead, right? Is regularly every week during an EU primetime Land of the Dead, right? You will almost always see a Destro win, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that generally exists, right, because of how warbands function and coordination functions. There tends to be more organized and pug warband leaders on Destro than Order, right? Like on
Yeah.
Order, like what is it currently? Retribution, maybe Bene with Couture once in a while,
The,
and
ch- the
Rolgrim.
the three chief runners, to answer that question, I think I know where you're going with this, but you've got Formosa, which is Hello GG. Most of the
Yeah,
time, they do not have a full war band. I mean, they'll pull people in to try to even it out, but I've run with GG. He is absolutely fearless. He does not care if he's outnumbered. He will fight to the bitter end, and I respect that. I do.
yeah.
Same way I've
But
seen some Destro players do it. I can respect, fighting it out no matter what. Don't give an inch. Retribution is one of the other organized war bands, and then yes, Rolgrim. Where I disagree with Rolgrim, and I've told this to him, is that I do not hold true to the thought process of mass Zerg. Everybody pile up on one person. I will not. I don't like that. I despise that type mindset.
but with that said, and Formosa in particular, Formosa isn't generally they're not active during EU prime time, and they're definitely not active on NA prime time. They fit this like very early cycle where it's like midday for Europe and early morning for NA, where they are most active because of their time zone. Like they're primarily Asian. Yeah.
Yeah, true.
Yeah,
Very
so
true.
they're like, unfortunately, like as much as I do appreciate Formosa and Hello Gigi, they're just not active when the vast majority of the player base is active.
Yeah,
So, like, they never attend Land of the Dead on an EU prime time. It's middle of the night for them, right?
I got you.
But why does Destro currently do so well? And it's just their vast. They have more pug warband leaders. Like you have Zorbax, you
Yeah,
have Peur de Trois,
yeah,
you have Scrodius even some
yeah,
regard as well,
yeah.
right? And they're regularly opening up pug warbands where they will lead and try and organize something. And you
Very
just
true.
don't have that order at all.
Oh, I know. I've said that many times. I've had people come in my chat say, "Well, they got an unfair advantage," and I'm like, "No, that's not it." I said I can lay it out. The truth of it is, with Land of the Dead, as you just said, Destro has the organization. They have the people willing to step up and form pug war bands to where those war bands work in conjunction with the pre-mades, and they do it
Yeah.
very effectively.
Um,
That's a testament to their organization and their skill, and they're willing to work together. Order is completely fragmented. They will not cooperate with one another. Even at times, I've seen alliances tear themselves apart. Where, use this for example, Bitterstone and Ben and Tylax don't see eye to eye. So they could be fighting, say they go into Land of the Dead, using this as an example. They could be fighting together. If one warband leader decides to do something and the other one disagrees, rather than set aside and work on one common goal, they'll go do their own thing. And it ends up being where order splits itself. And more often than not, order tears itself apart because the pre-mades won't trust the pugs. The pugs can sit there and be fighting, holding their own, actually doing good. And I've seen Rolgrim do this. He will literally turn his back on a pug and watch them die and does not care. Doesn't matter if there's a good chance to win the fight or if it's a loss. He'll just throw him under the bus and be about his business. And I'm like, isn't the overall objective to win the fight? And it's like when I hear people say, well, where's the fight? Where's the fight? I'm like, well, when the fight's right in front of you and you turn around and leave because it's not what you want, and that's Order's own fault. That's not Destro's. Destro, if anything, and this is a rarity for me to say this, Order could take some serious notes from Destro on the team play, because that's the difference that gets Order so much, is the lack of team effort overall. I'm not saying pre-mades don't work well together. They do, for obvious reasons. But this bit of it's me against the world, it doesn't work real well. It never will.
I think in a way you're kind of answering a question I have for you.
Fire away.
But what, like, since you're pretty much an order biased player, yeah. Who is like your favorite warband leader on order?
Honestly, I don't have one.
Like, let's say hypothetically, right? And this is generally never the case. That every warband, right, was running at the same time, like all the organized on order, right?
Yeah.
And you had the ability to join any of them on the fly, right? Who would you join them?
That would be a close toss up between Rhett and Gigi.
Okay, and why is that?
They're very similar. They're usually open minded to most things, and they like to try different ways of doing things, and they're up for almost anything. Whereas some of the other warband leaders I've run with are very rigid, and they only want to do one set thing and nothing else.
Okay, and then so I guess then I think I know the answer, but who's your least favorite?
Least favorite?
Yeah, no. Okay, and that's like primarily because he instigates a
he likes
Zerg.
He likes to instigate the Zerg bit, and he's quick to want to boss people around. This morning in High Pass, I literally told him, "You do you," because he was sitting there trying to bark orders at me and everyone else. I'm like, I'm not bending a knee to you. You wanna go do your thing. You wanna go hold up somewhere. Go for it. That's his thing. I'm not. I'm not doing that, and I don't care for him. I've tried running with him, and as a leader, he may be good for what he does, but he does not inspire loyalty. At least not in my book.
I'm a little different. I do like in terms of like the warbands that consistently run on only order, right? I primarily prefer Rolgrim, but I do hate how Rolgrim does instigate a Zergy mindset. And he tries to hold hands with the other warbands far too much, or tries to create a situation where Order has a population advantage, in my opinion. Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, and when he does that, inevitably, what he's realistically doing is he's killing the lakes, right? Because he wants to stack aside so hard that we just murdered one side into the Grand Destro, right? And effectively he's going to kill the lakes, and I just disagree with that entirely, because the fun of the game is the fight. Yeah, the fun of the game is the fight, and the consistentness of the fight. And anybody who tries to dislodge that or subvert that, I just don't agree with. I do agree. I think he's a pretty good leader. I think he can organize very well, and I do enjoy playing with him. But yeah, I don't agree with some of the things he does on a consistent basis. But I mean, I think that's fair with everybody.
True. I did my time as a warband leader, predominantly pugs. Me and Sproximus used to lead pug warbands quite regularly. We got to the point where we could put together pug warbands to where we would stop Gruff Rip. We would even take on FMJ. And this was back before the currency change. It just... A pug can be as good or as bad depending on how if you can put it together with solid people.
Speaking about this a little bit more though, the way in which like Destro does it, right, where they always consistently have Zorbax or Peur or any of the other people that try to organize through just open parties, right? And Order completely lacks that. There is nobody on Order that consistently does that day in, day out, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a huge void in Order, And it kind of sucks too because you have players like yourself and a lot of other players that will consistently only play one faction. And Rolgrim, for all intents and purposes, is not like an entry like warband, right? Like he has high renown rank requirements to join. He has either high gear requirements to join, and you can't effectively like Zorbax existing on Destro is a great entry point for a new player into like what the hell is RVR at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Because you just get in, he has no requirements, you just follow him, and whatever happens, happens, right? And effectively, there is nothing like that on Order. And it kind of creates like bad environments for Order where they now feel like they're incentivized to Zerg a little bit more so than others.
True.
Yeah, and I wish there was more effort by us people, and even from my point of view, maybe I should be more involved with trying to organize that. But it's such a hard thing to do on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My biggest problem with the war when I've tried to help get pug war bands going, and this is part of why I stopped trying, is Order's own penchant for not wanting to listen. People will get in a war band and all they want to do is leech. They don't want to. They don't want to do anything. I've had people from various guilds that will tell me real quick, "Well, I'm just in here to get a free ride." They don't want to do anything. So when I kick them, they're like, "Oh, well, you got any idea who I am?" I'm like, "I don't care if you're the Pope, Mother Teresa, or God himself. If you're not going to fight, if you're not going to do your job and help the warband, then you're useless."
I agree.
And they go off the handle. I'm like, "Would you like me to play the world's smallest violin for you?"
So in more of like a community direction like question, are you? I don't actually see guild titles in game. So what guild are you in by chance?
I have my own guild.
Okay.
Since I stream, I went that route because most guilds do not want streamers in with their pre-made war bands.
Sure.
Far, Retribution and Formosa have been the only two that really don't mind, and it's because they have the mindset, bring on the fight, which is usually what happens. It does bring on the fight.
I think well, maybe this is maybe Destro bias in a way, but there are a few Destro guilds and ex-Roman guilds that allow that as well.
Well, again, I can't speak to that because one, I haven't had any interaction with some of them. Would I love to be able to sit down and talk to some of these people? Sure. Which is why I have repeatedly put out the call for people from across the community. Hey, come talk. If I'm not understanding something, then please come explain it to me. I'm willing to listen.
Who is within the community somebody you'd really like to talk to? Because you mentioned that, and I'm just wondering, is there like a short list of names?
Honestly, any one of the warband leaders from Destro, or even some of the guild leaders. I'm not picky. I would love to see. I would love to see Gruff Rip or any of them. Broda. I would love to even get Zorbax to come over here and have a chat, simply so I could hear their thoughts on things. I may be an order only player, but when it comes to what needs to be done for the community's going to win out. I don't care if it's something that negatively affects me or not. I'll deal with it. My sole goal is just that, the community.
Maybe with that, like, more expanded upon though. With that said, like, you don't engage with the Destro side of the community while playing the game, right? Maybe in this outside the game you do, but why don't you, X-Realm?
I just don't care to. Any game that I've ever played, I always pick one side and I stick with that side. It's kind of hardwired into me on a loyalty level. Once I make a choice, that's it. I'm there, good or bad. I'm not. I won't do it.
That's fair.
Since I don't, I've played Destro for doing the quest guides and stuff, I actually went and did their quest guides for their cities first, because it was people from Destro that came to me and said, "Hey, we know you had a hand in doing the kill collector quest for both factions," which I did. I literally rewrote and did the ones that needed doing for both factions, Destro and Order. When it comes to doing stuff for Destro or Order, I will do whatever I need to if it will help the community. My personal dislikes and likes don't enter into the equation.
Okay. Maybe with branching off a little bit, like I think I have a good idea, but like, what's your favorite style of content within the game? Like scenarios, warbands, cities, solo play obviously is an option. Within like even the RVR, it's like you could go small scale, like mid scale with 12 people, or the full warband, or even Zerg. But like, what do you enjoy most?
I'm the type player, I'll play any of it. Sure, I'll solo. Sure, I'll do small groups. I prefer war bands and larger scale fights, preference wise.
Do you prefer city then?
City, no, but only because I hate Altdorf. I would love to burn that place to the ground. I cannot stand that city. I just have never cared for it, but that's more rooted in lore than anything else.
Okay.
That's from my lore and my RP days. I don't like Altdorf.
But so, do you engage with city then when it is icy, like when Order Siege is icy?
Generally no. Once in a
Why's that?
while, I'll go attack if I'm needed to. But honestly, I don't enjoy either one.
Okay.
It's not that I'm against IC. I'm not, because I've spent enormous amounts of time wandering around IC doing the quest guide, and I'm still working on that to finish it up. I don't like those two cities. I'm for one thing, to put this in perspective for everybody out there. I play a Dowie because, one, in real life I am barely above what's considered a legal dwarf. I'm very short. I have a very strong sense of family, very strong sense of loyalty and honor, and those are things that drive me. So I chose the class that fit that bill. For me, it's the Dowie, because it encompasses those aspects that I'm already prone to.
So with that said, though, not to disregard your personal life, so with I would assume with like city scenarios and warbands, right? That said, that you think warbands like RVR is your favorite content, yeah, and cities are your least favorite content, correct?
For the moment, yeah, until they add
Yeah.
in the two dwarf cities.
Okay, and with that said, like with RVR, what do you think needs to change, or like what improvements? If you were head developer of the game, you had all the access, all the power to instill your vision for things, right?
Honestly, to answer that question, to improve it, I would try some ideas that the community has suggested, see what works, instead of just changing it to one particular asset. Say, okay, this is what it's going to be. One of the things that I would love to see, and at least try it, mind you, it may not work at all. Take the instant servers out. Make it an open world siege setting. So you still have the BOs to fight for. It would just increase the number of people fighting over it. You still have the overall objective to kill the leader of the enemy city. I would at least like to see it tried, so it opens it up to more possibilities, and people that are leveling have a chance at jumping in on it too. Yes, I understand, Solo, that it would open the door to zerging. I get it. But pretty much any change you make, that zerging aspect is always going to be there. Even I will admit, I don't think there's a way that you will ever break the zerg mindset. Ever.
I agree. I think people are incentivized in certain ways to zerg because they themselves will preach that they want a fair fight, yeah, but they at the same time cannot compete with other people in fair fights, right?
That's true.
So
I
if
know from running with Formosa and with Retribution, and I've run with Retribution plenty of times when it's just their one warband. They don't always run that second one.
mm-hmm.
And I've been right there where we will fight where it's just us by ourselves, our one warband versus three Destro warbands, and we will fight to the bitter end.
With that said, and continuing on with a point here, it's you say city, right, is your least favorite content, and I
Yes.
generally understand why, because okay, you don't want to fight in IC, you don't want to fight in Altdorf, okay, that's fair, and you would prefer to fight in the Orc and Dwarf cities, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so if those were open, I'm just going to take a guess here that you would partake in city almost consistently, right?
Not consistently, because I don't like doing cities constantly. That's part of what killed the fun. That's what drove me to stop.
Well, as
with the
city exists right now, right? It
Yeah.
only occurs on a 3 to 4 day cycle, so
Yeah.
maybe on a weekly basis, correct?
Sure, on a weekly basis, I wouldn't mind doing it as a change of pace, because I did initially like doing city, but when I first started doing city, keep in mind this is when there was a city happening every single day, and it quickly burned out for me, and I just got to where I didn't care for it.
Outside of you burning out, right? What changes would you make to the current city and its current state, right? Other than opening up the dwarf cities, that would make it more entertaining or for you to partake in? Because I think right now, a current stance that I have, right, is, and I've seen this quite often, is city will occur and the lakes will be filled with 200 plus people on both sides.
Yeah.
And maybe 5 or 6 cities pop, right?
Yeah.
And it's concerning to me that a large portion of the community doesn't partake in city, because that ideally is where the most content and enjoyment or competitiveness of the game comes from. And I would want to know what, because I see these proposed changes all the time on the forums, but like, what do you think should happen to like get people more interested in city on a consistent basis?
The biggest thing that I've heard out of most people is there's no real incentive to do city. Used to be the incentive was the rewards you would get at the end of it. They took that out, and that seemed to kill a lot of interest. Now, yes, it's a good place to gauge how well you're doing as a war band, or as even if you go in as a small 12 man, it's an excellent way to gauge your skill. A lot of the complaints I've heard that most people they're tired of, they try to do a city and they get matched up against a pre-made and they got no chance, so it's killed their drive to do it.
Wouldn't that be more incentive for them though to go out in a way, and because it is an MMO after all, you have to play with other players to achieve goals, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be more of an incentive for them to go out and branch out and create friends or create acquaintances that they could then in turn fight those other 12 or 24 mans in city with, right?
True.
And with that said, why don't they?
A lot of the people that I've talked to over the last 4 years, and I'm not saying this is everybody's mindset, but certainly and I've had people come into my chat and say it, is that the hostility that they've run into, at least on the order end of things, and even some people have said they've seen it on Destro too, is the toxic mindset, where when you do ask for help or you try to talk to people, or if you make a mistake if you're a new player, people just chew you up. Rather than like, hey, wait a second, is this person brand new? They immediately go for the jugular.
That's fair.
I had it done to me repeatedly. When I first started playing, I had people show me absolutely no mercy. They're like, you're horrible, delete your character. I'm like, I just started playing not even a week ago. I mean, I hadn't played since live. So to some degree, I'm like, you got to give people a chance. I mean, if you don't give people a chance and you just immediately tear into them and you just belittle them constantly, and I get people are gonna say, "Oh, you're wanting to hold their hand." No, it's not it. But you've got to give people a chance to learn. Now, if they may consciously just decide, okay, I'm just not gonna listen, I'm not gonna try to learn or adapt or improve myself, then yeah, that's different. But when you have somebody that's brand new that's wanting to learn, and the first thing they run into is, oh well, go Google this or go play Destro or just uninstall. And I've seen comments like that being said. That doesn't help the situation. It really doesn't.
I think because I'm a new player relative to most people, right? Just starting this game in January and only playing generally like 5 months up until this point. Yeah. That this game lacks. There is no good resource for almost any information relating to this game, like how to build your character, best in slot, mastery points, tactics, etc., how they vary and what they do from point to point, right?
Actually, in that regard, there is, for the last better than a year now, Rubius and his guild and numerous others, including myself, have been relentlessly working on stuff that has been put up on the wiki, and a lot of people have reposted older guides where the information is still very much valid, more than enough to help new players. So
I would say that's true, but my counterpoint to that is that yes, some of the information is viable still, but not all of it is.
Not all of it, no.
And then when starting this game in January and then playing for this currently 5 months, right? A lot of the information available online, and I'm only coming from the perspective of Zealot and Rune Priest currently, right?
Yes.
Is flat out wrong. It's your best in slot. The recommended on the forums is completely wrong. The talismans you put in your gear is completely wrong. The mastery points and what tactics to take for varying levels of situations is almost all wrong, right? Mm-hmm. And I've only gotten to this point of like having the knowledge through meeting other players and asking the right questions and doing my due diligence and asking a variety of people. And I really do fear for the new player because many people are not going to be like me and really go out there and do their homework and really try and ask a lot of questions to a lot of people, right?
That's true.
They're just going to take what is said first and run with it, right? And they're going to go up against people, possibly like myself, where they're just going to get absolutely like destroyed because they have no knowledge. And what knowledge they do have is almost all wrong knowledge.
Yeah.
And it scares me, like, because I see a lot of new players and they don't know anything, and they like there's a lot of other people that will come into advice channel and tell them what it is, and they're also all wrong. And there's just like fulfilling prophecy of just wrong information breeds more wrong information.
Well, here's the thing that I will say to that to try and counter that. It's more or less just pointing people at this. Rubius, now this is back podcast number 6. Rubius, who headed up the wiki and overhauling it and starting to overhaul it to correct the information. I know Vegeta in Discord, which is Techno, he has also been working on updating information. There's a handful of people that are making the conscious effort to correct that information to make it available. Here's the thing as far as with the advice channel. When somebody asks for help with a class, you're probably going to see multiple different answers. People are going to say, well, no, this works. Ultimately, the information they're providing is based on what they found that works for them and their play style.
Yeah, but like objectively, there is correct decisions that you should be making depending on the variety of content you are doing, right? And this changes very drastically in your whole build in terms of your gear, your tactics, your mastery points, even skill usage can change very dramatically, going from large scale to small scale, or even in large scale if you're asked to do a certain thing.
That's true, which brings me to the next thing. And to answer your question, Gamora, Yes, Rubius has done numerous updates, and so has Techno on the ROR wiki. So have I. I generally send the information to Rubius or whoever, and they make the much needed changes. Same way that I ended up going and doing the dungeon guide videos, or at least current guide videos, was because Max had asked for somebody to step up and make newer videos, something current to reflect how things work now. And no one said anything, so I stepped up to the plate on that. Uh, Rubius has also pointed this out, and he has left the door open for anyone to volunteer. If you have information that would help with classes, and you want to volunteer that information, you want to do a very in-depth guide, then reach out to him. He has said repeatedly he is more than willing to help people learn how to post stuff on the wiki so that they can add and make corrections, and say they see information that's wrong, they can go in there and change it to the more current information. So he has repeatedly asked that and has said that. And there's been times where I've seen people say, oh, well, I just can't be bothered. Well, if you can't be bothered to put forward the information that you say would help people, then okay, what you want one person to do everything, and then you want to sit there and critique it from the shadows?
Personally, so I haven't myself written a guide, but I'm working on it for Zealot Roompers. But I have seen, I have tried to broach people that I see are doing things incorrectly, and you get very mixed results.
Yeah.
And this goes to people posting guides. I've seen guides where people have posted guides for Room Priest and Zealot in Discords, right?
Yeah.
And they're simply wrong with a lot of their information.
Very
and
true.
I've tried to be as non-offensive as I can at times and point them in a more directed approach with how they need to be doing things. And they don't change, or they continue to be perversive in advertising their incorrect information. So if from a experienced player's perspective, and I don't think I am one as of now, but I think you would see that the more experienced people are, the less they want to engage, because they're just going to be like, people are going to continue to spread misinformation, and it's not going to be fixable in a lot of regard.
Yeah. Well, and to that, okay. Now, Bree, on that front, yes, I understand casual because I'm a casual player myself, but I've also been a hardcore player on plenty of other games. If you really want to learn something and understand something, even if it's casual play, you still take the time to go research it. You got to make an effort. It can't be just, oh, well, I'm going, and I'm not attacking you on this, so please understand this. It cannot be a case of, oh, well, they're supposed to hand me everything right off the bat. That is never going to realistically happen. If you're a casual player and you do not want to take the time to try and improve or take advantage of guides and information that is posted, that is your decision. But people need to understand, if that's the decision you make, you can't sit there and say, well, why I'm not getting my way. Why, somebody explain this to me. The information's there. And I'm saying this in general because you bring up a valid point. There's casual players, and a lot of people don't have the time to spend hours on end. But you don't necessarily need hours on end. If you're playing one particular class, just go read the information for that class.
What, in your opinion, is the number one problem facing like the RoR game itself right now? Because I have my perspective.
Honestly, from what I've seen so far of the RoR game, is a resistance to trying new ideas. They would
In
rather
what sense?
they would rather stick with one particular way of doing things and not try and adapt to anything, whether it be an improvement or not.
Are you talking more of like a meta sense where, like, for instance, Order in meta sense, right, objectively should run a lot of Slayers in Warband because of the utility they bring, the damage they bring, etc.? Or are you talking in a different sense?
Hold on a second. Sorry, I got distracted with what Bree was saying. I'm not attacking you, Bree. So please don't take it. And Zerg is right. You're fine. You have a limited amount of playtime. I get that. There's people on here that can only play for an hour, 2 hours a day, and that's it. Re-say what you said though, Sigon. I do apologize.
Yeah, no worries, no worries.
Got distracted answering that.
So you say it's the number one problem currently facing the game is that the player base itself doesn't want to try new things, correct?
Yeah.
And I'm asking in a sense, is that a more of a meta sense? And to expand on that or give an example, is currently the meta for Order and Warband play is to bring a lot of Slayers, right? Because of the utility and the damage output they bring in a variety of ways, right? Or are you saying it in different contexts, like breaking Zergs? Like, in what sense?
I would say the entrenchment that I'd run into, the chief entrenchment, is the whole meta concept where only play with a certain setup, only play with certain classes, and
like a 2-2-2 setup,
and never deviate, never try anything new. Yes, the 2-2-2 works good, and it's tried and true. I mean, it's proven that it's a valid way to do things. But when you compartmentalize, when you basically put yourself in a box and you don't ever adapt or continue to adapt or evolve a strategy, it stagnates. And it does, more often than not, it'll lead up to where you start losing. Or it just doesn't work anymore. I like to be open-minded on all play styles. If somebody says, hey, let's try this strategy, sure, let's try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You learn something new.
I understand that. I have a different opinion of what I think personally is the biggest struggle facing the game currently. My personal viewpoint is the current largest problem, right, is player growth in terms of new players playing for a long period of time, and player retention, right?
True.
And I think those are the things that are could be most easily handled with a variety of fixes. But these things are like almost never addressed, I feel, by developer side. And I think it really starts at Crest Game and how like this best in slot gear is obtained, right? And you know this as well as I do. We're NA players, right? I tried to play NA frequently, but the amount that you can do in European hours, like in a 3-hour span of European prime time, right? I can accomplish more in those 3 hours than I can in almost 10 hours of NA game, playtime, right?
True, yeah.
And that's just, it's abysmal. I can't get crests. I can't get anything, right? And as time goes on, and I think you've seen this, I definitely have, the NA player base consistently dies. And you're almost seeing it on EU primetime as well. Like, it's less and less players day by day. And it's sad because the game is effectively very good, right? And if I think this is the number one issue facing the game, and if the developers don't address it, it's sad. But like, what do you think they should do to address like player retention and player growth? Like, do you have any ideas? I personally have a few, but I'd love to hear yours first.
As far as bringing more people into the game, one of the chief ways, I mean, this game gets its advertisement largely through streaming, word of mouth. I would love to see more people out there in the community advertising, say, hey, come check it out. But at the same time, I would like to see when we have these sudden influxes off of the videos that the large YouTube streamers do. I would love to see more people stay, but the biggest thing, and this has happened every time, is that the and this is aimed solely at the veterans of the community, because this is what tends to happen, is they will go after those new players. And there's been people in Bitterstone that have flat out said they don't want new people to learn. They want them to leave. And this is what often ends up happening, is you have newer players, they get run over repeatedly, or they can't get any help, they don't know what they're doing. When they try to ask for help, they get no help. So they just quit. They're like, it's not worth their time. Now, part of the other argument that I've heard too is they feel the game is too grindy. That they need to be able to gear up quicker. Well, this is an older game. It's on an older engine, and there's a lot of us that enjoy that aspect of it, so that you actually have a sense of accomplishment when you get something. It makes
fair.
Makes it more satisfying. On the other end of the spectrum, I'm fully aware of the fact a lot of people, and as Bree just pointed out, as a casual player, you don't have time to sit there and play for hours on end every single day. Sometimes you might play for 2 hours one day and not play again for 3 days.
But do you feel that like there is a tipping point, right, where that to satisfy? And I've heard your viewpoint a lot on gearing, right? Like a lot of the older player base feel that they're entitled to this gear because they've played longer, and thus they should be able to beat up on newer players even easier because, again, I have my BIS gear, I worked for it, and I want you to work for it too, right? Rather than just viewing it as like, well, my game will die. And the sooner that happens, right, the worse it is for me, right? Because then I have less people to play with, right? Wouldn't it be better overall to have more people playing the game on a consistent basis by lowering the cost of things, or increasing how many, like crests, for instance, increasing how many you can obtain in a shorter period of time, right? Because that inevitably would just help more player retention. Like, again, when I've started this game, like in January, I have witnessed personally people that I started playing with already quit within 2 or 3 months, right? And they just get to renown rank 70. They see, okay, it's going to be a 20,000 crest grind to get BIS. It's 10k for your sovereign, and then another 10k for your ring, right? And I've accomplished that in about 250 to 300 hours on each of my characters. And for me, that's not much. But again, like people in your chat, they say like I only have access to 1 to 2 hours a day, right? And if we extrapolate that, right, like it took me 300 hours for them to even obtain best in slot for one character is going to be months. And it's slowly they're going to play less and less. Like we at some point have to have the developers, I feel, have to have a responsibility to reward players on a consistent basis, right? And right now, right, like we're not rewarded on a consistent basis, right? If you do optimally to get your best in slot gear, you are getting your Vanquisher plus a mix of PvE gear, right? You're sitting on that mix of gear until you're renown rank 82 and you have best in slot. That's the optimal way to do it, right? To not waste any time, that's how you would do it. And that's not fun. To sit at the same power level that you are at basically renown rank 50 all the way till you're renown rank 82 almost. Why is that a good system? It makes no sense. But that's the system we like play in, and that hurts player retention. And if you try and suggest that system to another player, like, oh, hey, friend, come play with me. It's an MMO. It's a lot of PvP focus. That hooks people pretty instantly, right? Like, oh, that's cool. And then you say, okay, well, you're going to be undergeared and have a huge deficiency in power level compared to a best in slot person for a month or two. In a PvP focused game, to me, it doesn't work. It makes no sense. And there's such a huge power creep too. Because when you go from Vanquisher, like mixed with some PvE gear, you could buy Invader pretty quickly, right? Due to your renown rank. But you really can't because it costs 5.5k crests to buy that. And if you buy that set of gear, you're now sending yourself back even more when you try and buy your Bis, which is 20,000 crests.
Well,
why is that a good system? And the more I talk with the older player base, they think it's a fine system and it should remain as is. But
it's because they've learned how to go about gearing in a way that makes it fast. Partly to answer you, I've leveled multiple different ways. I leveled straight through PvP, did nothing else but scenarios. Went scenarios, then did the lakes. Was very slow, very painful. Then I tried doing just PvE. Very slow, very painful. The system that I found that worked the best and allowed me to get to where I'm at now. I'm at RR 79 on my Warrior Priest, but I'm sitting at almost full solve. I'm only missing one piece, and I'm sitting at almost 10,000 War Crests. The system of leveling and playing that has worked the best has been oscillating between the dungeons, the scenarios, and the lakes. I basically did the dungeons to get the gear to
get the wards,
to avoid saving, to avoid using War Crest needlessly, because as you just pointed out, you get up to a particular gear level and then you spend all your War Crests. Well, now you're setting yourself back, and it's going to take you even more time to get those War Crests saved back up, because you will out level the pace in which you get the War Crests unless you get really lucky and you just get on a phenomenal win streak with the War Crests.
My point of view is still, though, I'm an NA player. I would love to play the NA time slot and try and enjoy the game and get the same rewards I do get out of playing an EU time slot. But it's just simply not there, right? And if I play NA, it's, you'll play for 2 or 3 hours and get next to nothing.
Yeah.
And there's just no content there. The player retention's terrible. And when I've played NA Primetime, you'll meet people that play NA, and within a month or two, they're gone. They see that the grind is endless. They see that it's almost for them to do it, it's going to take them an extra 6 months. Do we change the system in a way where, the lower the population, the more crests are gained? And then that kind of helps stabilizes, because when the population hits too low, more people are going to want to log on to take advantage of that situation, right? So then we boost the population. Or is it lowering costs of endgame gear so that it's more accessible to the lower population side? Does that make sense? I don't know. I just don't think the system is perfect.
I understand where you're going, but here's the thing: the system's never going to be perfect. The simple truth of it is you have the entire population of the gaming community, Europe, Asia, all over the world, all playing on one server. Yeah. North America, for whatever reason, has never been a strong supporter of the community. They have ample opportunity.
I don't think it's actually that, because in the last
one sec, let me finish my thought. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
The North American player base again has never been that large. And I've seen posts where people say, "Well, can we get a North American server so it's just North Americans playing?" It won't work. For one, the devs couldn't afford to run 2 servers, and 2, the population is just not there. I mean, unfortunately, during the time zones that the North American population tends to play, it just suffers because there's a lack of numbers. Unfortunately, there's no real 100% way to fix that I see, short of getting more people into the game, playing the game. I mean, yeah, you could raise the reward gains for the nighttime player base, but then here's the problem to that. If you do that, then it's unfair to the Euro people, and they're like, okay, well, what's the point of playing during our times? We'll just go play it in A times, and then it will just reverse itself. Because people will always go the route of least resistance to get to their goal. So implementing a system that would benefit the NA players is just never going to work. It's
I get that.
and they again, to quote what, or to bring in chat on this, because a lot of chat's been talking about this too, is they've already toned it down to make it easier for people to gear. The old system was a lot harder to get gear than what this system is, by far. So I'm not 100% of any way that they could do anything to make it any easier. I mean, yeah, you could try upping the Warcrest rewards to, maybe to help increase the speed in which you're getting your gear. That may be an option to try. Add more Warcrests to the mix. But then the other end of the spectrum is if you do that, people are going to gear faster, and then they're going to hit that high-end content, and you'll probably still lose them because their chief driving reasons, I just want to get to the top and be best geared, and then I'm done. Not everybody plays for the competitive side of it.
I get that, and it's unfortunate though, but if you give them the gear sooner, right, and they leave, they're probably going to leave anyways, right?
Yeah.
But there is a mix of the population that just sees the grind, right? Sees like the time zones in which the grind is preferable, EU versus NA, right?
Yeah.
And sees that like as an NA player, they log in, it's impossible. Or it's not impossible, it's just going to take an extremely long amount of time. And so, like, there has to be an onus on some front to player retention and the I just don't know what it is. Like, I personally think it's the gear grind to some extent. I don't think having a 20,000 crest gear grind on a vast majority of the classes to get the best in slot is ideal. It's just like that's a 1 to 2 month grind just for like 10,000 crests at times, right?
Yeah, and chat's having a very in-depth discussion about that too. I mean, they're right along paying attention, and I'm reading everything you guys are saying. It's honestly, and I've said this before in other podcasts, and even off the podcast, I don't think there's going to be a genuine way to work out a balance that's going to truly fix the problem. The only real way that I could see addressing the problem is to get more people in the game and getting them to stay. Yes, you could try lowering the gear gap, but they've already made one big adjustment to it. I mean, short of, and Tosh put this idea out there, make it to where you could just if you want to do nothing but PvP, you can purchase PvP gear. And if you want a PvE, you can purchase PvE gear. Take the restrictions off the gear. You could try that and see if it works. If it works, then, run with it. Make some adjustments. Fine tune it. If it works, run with it. If it doesn't work, it's easy enough to undo it and shut it off. Yeah, that's true. When you hit Vanquisher, you tend to hit a plateau. Because your next best up gear is Invader level, and it takes time to get from the Vanquisher to that level. So yes, there is a gap.
And most people don't even buy Invader because then it's 5 point like Vanquisher gear, right? I think is 1.5k crests, right? Yeah. And then your Invader gear is 5.5k crests. You need 5 times the amount of crests from Vanq to Invader, right? So people skip Invader entirely. They can't buy Invader. They don't have access to Invader, right? Because by the time you can even possibly afford Invader, you're already in mid-70s, right? Yeah. You're looking at Sovereign, right? And that's a 10,000 crest grind. So when you look at it objectively, like you won't buy Invader. You'll just save crests for Sovereign, get the Warden PvE. But that stagnates progression of your own personal character and kind of retention in a way, I think, too.
That's true. What the Fergrim is saying, it started when T2, T3, T4 were merged, so players ended up being matched against people who were further advanced. I get that. The only quick fix solution that I could say, and this is going off of what some of chat has said, you could up the stats on the Vanquisher gear to close that gap.
I think it's that, or you. I remember during Valentine's Day event this year, we had the double crests, right?
Yeah.
It felt very good. Like the crest gain, like within that week, like I played like I had no life, and I think I grinded 7,000 crests in that week. But I
Yeah.
played
Yeah.
a ton of hours, easily, probably 150 hours in like a week or two span, right?
Yeah.
Because like that was the most optimal time to take advantage of the system.
Yeah.
But that felt like it was like rewarding and good. Why? Like I just don't understand why there isn't a push and by the community itself to get like that to the double crest as just a permanent feature. Because like I mean, either you do that or I think you have to lower the like crest cost of invader gear.
Yeah.
There's just no reason. Like a lot of times it's hard to even play this game because I'll log in, I'll be like, oh man, I want to play my Knight of the Blazing Sun, right? I'm like, cool, he's got Vanquisher plus some gear, right? That's it. I now need 20 renown ranks, 30,000 crests before I get to my next new piece of gear, right? I'm stuck playing the same version of my Cobs now that I will be like almost probably 2 months, maybe 6 months from now, right? That character will effectively not change at all within that time.
I got you.
And that's just it's boring. It sucks. Like I don't improve, right? And like you play an MMO like even in a role playing sense, you play like you go on an adventure, you improve your character. That's the fun of an MMO, right? And if there's just no improvement, right? I can see it from a new player's perspective because I was one, like how insufferable that would be.
I got you. I get what you're saying, and the dev now, to their credit, the devs are very much aware of it. They understand that, and it's a question that's been brought up in a couple of times during some of their dev streams. Their biggest problem with a lot of the things they want to do is the fact that the coding is so spaghetti, and they don't have access to a lot of the coding that the game originally run off of, so they're having to piece things together. And I know people have heard this time and again, but it's literally the truth. There's a lot of things they would love to do, and I've heard the frustration. I can't go into details because I do have access to things that you guys don't, but they're fully aware that hey, there's things that need addressing. The simple truth of it is I'm not entirely sure they're ever going to be able to fix all the issues just simply because of the way the coding is.
I agree to that. I don't want I know perfection is impossible. It's just a standard we try and achieve, but it's never actual possibility. But I mean, they like with the double crest, right?
Yeah.
They already did that. It worked. Why not make that a permanent thing? Or why not make it so that events happen on a monthly basis? Right?
That I can answer. That I can answer because it has been touched on in open conversation. The double XP, double renown stuff, and all that has been widely discussed, and it's been mentioned before that they wanted to start doing it like more frequently.
Yeah.
It's just a question of implementing it in such a way that it doesn't. It basically doesn't. They don't want to implement it, and it basically people gear up all their tunes, and then they're bored and they leave anyway. So the argument was against it as far as doing it because I think some people were like saying, well, why not do it every other week? And then a couple of people were talking about, well, let's do it once a month. I would be willing to do once a month. I would settle for that. I couldn't see a problem with doing, once a month, double XP, double renown.
I feel like double crest is like the big one though.
Yeah, well, it's never the crest too. But the other thing that they've noticed is that during those events, when that's going on, the player population increases. It also brings back some of the older players. So maybe doing it more frequently or have it last longer would not be a bad thing. I would definitely say one way that they could try and address some of the with the gear gaps and such, increase the Warcrest drops, because the thing about it is if you're in a in RVR zone and you're in a war band or even in a 6-man or 12-man or any kind of a group, you're gonna split the Warcrests that are dropping between you. So I mean, the only thing I could think to say to do to maybe compensate for that would be make sure that when, you know, when there's a kill that happens or an objective is taken, that the war crests are split evenly across the board so everybody is getting something. Because there's a lot of people that are like, I have no luck winning, which it is random. I mean, you can see the little roll indicator about it, and you might win one, you might not. Same way with the bags.
With something you said, if
Go ahead.
you don't mind if I touch on it really
Go
quick.
ahead.
You said you're in the know on certain information, right? That the rest of the community isn't privy to, and I can see why. But why isn't there more frequent effort by the devs in the community, like managers, to make a bridging of that information on almost a monthly basis? It seems like it'd be so inconsequential, like from a personal standpoint, to write up something where like, okay, these are our thoughts. This is what we want to do. This is the progress. Do you have opinions? It's like, get community feedback on a consistent basis rather than just like a week before something comes out, hey, this is how it's going to happen, this is what it's going to be, and by that time it's far too late to have a community opinion be like, well, that's a terrible change, what the hell are you doing?
I can speculate on some of it only as far as what I'm in my own viewpoint. Again, that's part of why I started the podcast, is because I wanted to step up and create a way to bridge that very gap you just mentioned, to have a way for the devs and the player population to talk directly to one another.
But I feel like it's a two-way street.
Yeah, it's a two-way street. The thing is with Max and the devs, and I really wish Kalang would join in on the podcast and actually be more active with it, since he's now the head of the community management team, because he really needs to have his ear to the ground and be listening, because he is the he is part of the team. I am not. I have access to certain things only because I have done things at the request of the devs, but that's as far as I can say with that. Him, on the other hand, it would be advantageous for him to be here and be talking to you guys, so that he can go directly to Max and them and say that, here's what the community's saying, because even Max has said it, and so is most of the rest of the team, that a lot of stuff gets lost on the forums. It's so jumbled, they miss it. Yeah, I wish the devs could be here to answer questions more frequently. The reality of it is they have real lives, so they're only able to allocate so much time.
And I understand that, but we have like roles in the official RoR Discord, and I don't actually understand the responsibility from role to role, right? But there's game masters, there's developer, and then there's community managers.
Yeah.
I've actually never seen community managers manage the community, like in what I would determine to be a management perspective, like bridging the gap of information. Like it seems like, from my perspective, the community wants so many things. They just want to be able to voice opinions, right? Have some sense of being heard, right?
Yeah.
But from a development side, it doesn't seem like that's actively ever heard or any progress is made.
Yeah.
It seemed, I don't know, like maybe I'm just not privy to any information and you are, and maybe know.
I'm trying to think what I can get away with saying without getting in trouble. I can use GamesBond as an example. When GamesBond was the head of the community management team, he used to do this quite frequently. It was nothing for him to show up in various streamer chats. You'd see him playing with the community, and he would talk and listen to the community. And then, as far as I know, he was relaying it up the pipeline. Since Kalang took over, that has, at least as near as anyone could tell, and I've seen the comments from the community, they feel like there's nothing there. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing now, is I arbitrarily decided of my own accord to try and open that avenue. So it's not ideal, and as you said, I wish Kalang and the other community managers would be more visible, but it goes back to the same thing. They all have real lives. They're not going to allocate but just whatever free time they have to this game. So
I understand that, but one thing I just don't understand at all, right, is I understand like it's a community effort, even from a developer side, right, to engage and flesh out what is here, right? But I haven't seen in my time, right, any push by them as well to
really bad.
alleviate. Apologies. I do that. Better?
Yeah, for a minute I thought it was on my end. I was like, hold on, let me fix that.
No, it's me. Apologies. But okay, so I haven't seen like from their end, right, a push at all to add any more people to alleviate some of their responsibility, right? Like there's this role in the official Discord, and I don't even really know the function of it. Like the community like just simply like reading the insider discords or whatever, wherever that information is, right?
You're breaking up again.
Apologies.
No worries.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, you're coming in loud and clear now.
Yeah. But yeah, why isn't there anybody doing that, like from their end? It seems like a very easy thing to do, and it also seems like they make no effort to find somebody to fill that role anyways.
Well, now this is something that Max and Rubius and them said during podcast episode 6, is that if you wanted to step up to help out on the team, apply and they'll talk to you. I don't know what the criteria is that they go by for bringing people on the team. A lot of the people that I've heard this say, well, I want to help, I want to do this. It's like they're all fine and well. They say they want to help, but when it comes time to actually do the work, then they're like, oh, I can't be bothered. So I think it's a question.
I've heard that too.
I think it's a question of the people that they've interviewed, and I don't have access to this, so I'm only speculating. I think it's just a case of the people that have been interviewed. It ends up being a case where they want to be on the team just to have that icon, but they don't want to do the actual job. They don't want to actually put the effort in, and that ends up hurting things even more. So
that's understandable.
It also is the fact it's a voluntary project. Most people's mindsets, unless you truly love Warhammer, they want to get something out of it. They want to be paid for it, and you're not going to make money on this. This is a passion project, volunteer entirely, and a lot of people, they just don't do that. It's all about self. What am I going to get?
But to expand on that, I know personally some people that I have interviewed to some varying degree for to be a part of the team, right? And I've talked to them why they weren't chosen and their perspective. And obviously, I'm only getting one side of the story, so it could be complete bullshit.
Watch the language a little bit because my sponsors are watching, please.
Yeah, my bad. But anyways, like, it seems also like people that would be a good fit were not chosen for a political purpose too. And I don't know how to be any more informative without saying who or what or when.
I get you. Basically, people that applied for the position, and it looks like they were denied based on someone's personal agenda rather than a professional level.
And I do see that, though, in some extent, and I think it's hard to ignore it a lot of times in the official RoR Discord.
Yeah,
with how people, like, especially from a developer, GM, game master's point of view, talk within the community?
I'll say this because it's my own personal view, and I've had this view since well before I ever did anything helping out the powers that be. My dealings with Wargrimnir have been less than favorable. I don't like him, and I'm not the only one that shares that view.
I've heard that many times.
When they tried to talk to him, he is very hostile, or he's very crass with the way he talks to people. And and to some degree, I've seen that play out with his comments, because he can be quite rude with the way he answers people, and he just doesn't care. And to me, if you're going to be a GM, especially the head GM, you have to remain fair and impartial, and not let your personal whims dictate your actions. If you're going to take action on any matter, any subject in the gaming community, it has to be solely on the grounds and the merits of the situation, nothing else. The minute you let your personal issues into the mix, then you've lost your perspective, and you should not hold that position. And I don't care for the way he does things.
From my understanding, Wargrimnir is the head of the RoR kind of community and game. Am I mistaken?
He's the head GM.
But he holds a majority of the decision-making power. Am I wrong?
I can't comment on that because it's not something I can comment on.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, I think at the end of the day, everybody involved in the community, all differences aside, would love to see this game flourish. Yeah. And it's an old game. It's hard to make it flourish. It just seems like it's a two-way street. It's developers and the community doing things together, and I see the community lash out and cannibalize itself in a way where it's like, oh, you do X, you do Y, you're ruining this game, right?
Yeah.
And I can agree with some of the sentiments. I agree that, like, yes, are these people in some way sabotaging the community itself? Yes. But it's also like the developers and like the community managers too, right? Like they're self-sabotaging in the same way. And I've even seen Wargrimnir go out. I've been privy to this, that he would rather see this game die effectively. Am I wrong?
Again, I can't comment to something that I didn't see myself.
Okay. Well, that's just what I've heard and what I've seen. And so it seems like on one end you have the community self-cannibalizing, and then you also have the developers and the community managers doing it too. And what's the fix? I don't know. I wish there was a fix. I mean, I want there to be a fix.
The only thing I can say, because Mac said this during a dev stream long before I ever started the podcast, yeah, he pretty much laid it out, because a similar conversation got brought up about Wargrimnir. And he said pretty much we defer to him when it comes to making judgment rulings. If he makes a decision that a ban is warranted, we're not going to overturn it. And Max has said he will not overturn it for any reason. So in that regard, Wargrimnir is basically God in that department as far as dealing with those situations. And that's part of why I won't comment on it, is because I don't know. Unless I see stuff for myself and can say yes for sure, there's no point in me commenting, because then it's just going to feed speculation. Oh, well, this person's saying this.
That's fair. Just since we were on the topic. Anyways,
no, it's just fine. Me personally, no, I do not care for Wargrimnir. And yes, I agree that I think he should be replaced as a GM. Almost certainly. Because I think his actions are unprofessional.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this from an objective-based point. I don't feel a ban should be handed out on a personal whim for any reason. I'm not saying that that's what he's done, because I don't know. I'm using myself as a model for this. If I'm going to hand out a ban, it's going to be because it has been warranted.
Okay. Um, I'm kind of out of things to talk about. If there's anything you'd enjoy to ask me personally.
No, I do have a question to bring in. This is a general where I bring up some of the questions, and I told the person that sent me this that I would bring this up, and I want to keep my promise on that. This was a question that Little Demons had sent to me, and this is for chat to discuss as well. In an organized warband fights with Destro to secure a zone, it was basically it had to do with warband play, and as Little says, Destro to secure his zone, but switches to order to defend the keep. Should they be applauded for making the fight more even or banned for manipulating the fight? It goes back to the X-realming. If they've started an active fight, they've been in the siege, and then partway through, they switch sides, is what Little is saying. And Little was curious as to whether or not, if you're openly, actively doing that in the middle of a current fight, should there be a punishment or should they be applauded for it? Was the question that Little had.
I think there needs to be a little bit of a more of a definition. And just quick question is, when you say current fight, do you mean fighting in an active zone, or do you mean
to use it as an example, an active siege? Say you're sieging High Pass. In the middle of that active fight, you're already committed to the siege. Well, you arbitrarily decide, okay, I'm going to switch sides and go help the other side.
I've never been in an instance where effectively a siege is called potentially by warband I am in, and that and we call for a siege and then siege a keep and then switch as soon as the ram's there and go try and defend it. I have been in situations though where I've pushed a fort with people I know and play with, and then switch to defend the fort. So with that said, I think it's fine to do the fort defense in that context where you push to try and get to the fort. A good example might be Calidor, and because order push for Fell Landing, and then you swap to Destro to defend the fort because effectively there's probably not going to be anybody in the fort to begin with, right? I think it should always be admirable to swap to the AAO side because it's a two-part thing, right? You're providing content for the order players that effectively you have nobody to fight other than like NPCs, right?
True.
And you're also helping like the currently online Destro players who have nobody else to group with, and they feel like all hope is lost, right? And you're giving them an active breath of fresh air to like come enjoy the content.
That's true, and Rob has a good point. X-Robing could be solved with limiting zone population like in forts. He says not a great solution, but lesser of evil solutions. Again, I understand the thought process behind it. In reality, for all the suggestions we make, I don't think there's ever going to be 100% way to fix it.
I don't think X-roaming is a problem. I think it is a byproduct or a symptom of a larger problem at hand, which tends to be population. And I think
they go hand in hand together. But even if you had a large population, if you had people continue to do that, it could still upend and affect the outcome of zone fights and stuff, which is very frustrating because people put so much time and effort into fighting to secure the zone. So I understand the dislike of switching sides. It's because it's just that. It's an annoyance. It's irritating that you're fighting as hard as you can trying to secure an objective, and then somebody decides, oh, well, I'm going to switch and go play the other side to get the defense tick or attack, whichever. So to some degree, there needs to be something in place to mete out some form of punishment to people that are doing it just to manipulate things. Now, as far as being able to tell when exactly that's happening, I don't know if you'd ever really be able to nail down 100% way of saying, okay, this is an instance of that, this isn't.
I agree with you, but as it stands now with the population that we play in today, right? Extrailming does feel like a byproduct of a larger problem, which just tends to be player retention. Like if I was on order, right, and there was something consistently to fight all day, and I wanted to play order, I could effectively, right? But
True.
just with how the population is, that's not a reality.
Very true. Yes,
And
the chief way to start addressing things first and foremost would be for us to have a larger population. A larger population, you would probably see this game completely change, and you
yes,
would, because there would be more people playing. You would have less it would also feed into the less of a need for people to switch sides, because then they say, okay, I'm just going to stay on my preferred faction. As far as getting people into the game is the biggest trick. And a lot of that just boils down to advertising and
I don't think
getting the
getting
word out
people.
on the game.
I don't think getting people into the game is like ever going to be a solution because it's very hard because it's a very niche game with a niche play style, right?
Yeah.
To drive people into this game, that's effectively a really hard time. But when they get here, right, through whatever means they do get here, there needs to be systems in place that affect player retention, right? There's some really interesting stats. I forget the website. Somebody made it on the community where it showed the effective numbers over, like, I think a 30 or 60-day span of how many people played what class, right? And the renown ranks, right? And as it stands, right, most people who play classes inevitably do get renown rank 80, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's because the majority of the player base that currently plays are people that are going to play no matter what, right? And they're here to stay. But it's the new players that just see the uphill climb and just say no thanks, right? And we do not make it easy for them to play and start out. I don't know. That's just personally me. I wish player retention would be addressed.
This I will say. This I can't say because Max has said this, and I know this is ever most on people's minds. People are frustrated. They want more content. They want actual changes. A lot of the changes that you guys are wanting so badly are on the table. That is as far as I can go with that without breaking the NDA that I agreed to.
Okay.
So here's the thing, and Max said this during my podcast. They didn't want to release any more stuff until they made sure that what they are intending to release, which is the overhaul of the ability system, was fully functioning, which I've had a hand in helping test.
Okay.
So, and it was a fair point, and people agreed in that podcast. They said, well, we appreciate that. We're tired of broken content. We're tired of broken skills and stuff. And Matt said, okay, well, that's what we're trying to aim for, is to release it all so it works right the first time, so that we are not having to do steady patches and trying to constantly fix stuff, so that we can then move on to adding in more content and adding in the things that you guys want. You can go back and watch podcast number 6 and listen to what Max says and hear it for yourself. They're not blind. They're not blind to what you guys want. Now it just boils down to a practicality if it's something they can actually do.
I've listened to that podcast. It's just simply like it comes down, in my perspective, and I think the vast majority of the player base as well, is that there's like a meme that exists currently in the current community, right? When is the ability change going to happen? And everybody just says in 2 weeks, in 2 weeks, in 2 weeks. And
I've seen it.
Yeah, and effectively, like, since I've been playing, I've been told, oh, it's just around the corner. It's March, it's April, it's May, it's June, it's July. It's
unless you hear it directly from the dev staff or from the community management team, there's no speculation on it. I know Dalen, Max, and the rest are working full tilt on it. That is as far as I'm willing to say with that, simply because that is what they've told me. There's only so fast they can go. I mean, it's plain and simple as that. I mean, if people want stuff to be rushed out, more issues to be addressed, then, as Rubius said, step up to the plate.
It's fair. It just seems that, and I've mentioned this already, like the communication from the developer and community manager side is just almost not there. And we have a bunch of people in this role on the RoR Discord, which are on with the community management tag, not even the developer tag, that are privy to the information and still don't contextualize it or put it in a format that us as the community can, just view from a time to time basis.
I can answer this question I can answer because it's been answered before, but you probably weren't around for it when it was. The community management team is broken down into sections. Not all the community managers have access to what another one is working on. Kalang is the de facto head, so he's the voice. He's responsible for announcements and so forth. Lil handles the bug forum.
Okay.
So she doesn't handle like the public announcements. Each one of them does a unique job. So that's why there's so many, why you have so many, and why people think, well, okay, well, we're not having any communication. Again, I wish that Kalang would do a little bit more announcements, maybe come in and participate on like the weekly Realm Watch, or come in on the podcast, and be that voice to be able to talk back and forth between the community and the dev team. So, again, for right now, between myself and Karis and now Tosh trying to do interviews, we're trying to open up that avenue. That's why I've told people repeatedly, the devs have thanked me for posting these videos to them, because they do listen to what you guys say. So everything that you guys have said today, they will hear. And that is directly from Max. They appreciate it. Max's own words. It gives them insight into the community. So I'm setting time out of what I normally would be doing in order to facilitate this, because I'm doing this because I want this community to grow. I want to see more activity. All I can do is provide the tools.
Of course.
I can't make people do things.
No, of course. It was insightful from my end. I don't really have anything else to discuss. I don't know if you do.
No, I was going to open the floor up and see if anybody in the chat had any questions. Anything you guys would like to ask Sigon, or any questions that haven't been asked already that you would like to pose that we could discuss. It's kind of a final call situation, guys, because I will be wrapping things up here in the near future. So, and basically, if you got a question, now would be the time to ask it. Anyone? If I don't get an answer, I'm going to presume that you guys have all had your questions answered for the day. At least for this podcast. Fair enough. Sigon, I do want to thank you for taking the time to reach out and come on the show and share your views, and I appreciate the fact and respect the fact that you disagree with the things I say. And as I said earlier, I love to hear different points of view. I love to hear the feedback, because obviously all of this is going to go to the devs. It gives them something to go on. So I immensely thank you for taking the time to come on the show, and look forward to possibly having you on later episodes if you so choose. Or if you'd like to talk to anybody else in your guild or on your side, whichever side you happen to be playing on, feel free to tell them, hey, would love to hear them on the show.
Yeah, no worries, man.
Any closing comments for the chat before we wrap it up? Sigon?
Oh, no, I'm good.
All Alright, guys. Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and raid out to someone in the RoR community since I've been going, because pretty much all I'm going to really be working on is leveling professions and stuff, and that's not the most riveting of things. Plus, I'm going to start working on the video so I can get it to the devs. Again, as always, thank you to everybody being here. If you have questions that you would like asked for the next podcast, please DM them to me, either in the RoR Discord here on Twitch, or you could drop word to me on my personal Discord, just whichever avenue you want to seek, or on the forums. And again, thank you, Sigon, for being here. Alright, guys, let's get a raid rolling and see who we got that I can get you guys to. Let's see. Somebody new, hopefully. Try to spread the love, as it were. Oh, we got a few people. Oh, I see who we're going to get. I see exactly who we're going to get. Let's go pay him a visit. Mr. Raptor. And you guys have a good one. I'll catch you on the flip side.